Genesis chapter 42, verse 1. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." Right, this is now improvising a bit here this morning. I didn't plan to sit here on a balcony and record. I want to be outside in nature. But as you can see on the camera in the background, it's raining, and it's raining quite a lot. Right? You can watch the previous video where we just finished before this rain started, but we were out there on the beach. Okay, so, but you still see the beauty here behind. So this is, we are in nature, you can't predict when it's going to rain or not rain. And so you need to improvise and make the best of the situation. Okay, a bit like how Jacob is going to ultimately kind of improvise here, or forcing his sons to go down. It's just something they could not predict, that the rain is not going to come, right? Unlike Jacob and the people there in that part of the world in the 7 lean years, they had nothing of this, okay? If they had, they would not have been lean years. Now, yes, I understand. One day of raining like this is not going to make the crops grow. You need more than just one day of raining, okay? But anyhow, even in Egypt, the thing is, it never rains, and the rain falls up further south, right, closer to the equator, where it rains, and then into the Nile catchment area, or in Ethiopia in the mountains, and they all flow down in the white and the blue Nile. Comes one there in Khartoum in Sudan, and then it flows through the whole of Egypt. Right, so anyhow, they're not dependent upon the rain kind of that we are falling here. But the people in Canaan, right, the people in Israel, they are more dependent on rain. Okay, their produce is by rain coming from above. And if there's a drought, then they can't have any food. And in Egypt's case, the drought was a lot further up, or then closer to the equator. There was not enough water in the Nile, so that is where their problem started. So there was like a universal kind of drought, at least in that part of the world. Okay, so they sure did not have the rain. Well, I guess they would have preferred the rain problem, because that means they would not have had to go to Egypt, because they could have produced their own food. And as for someone growing up in South Africa, in a drier area of South Africa, where our winter was when it rained, and that's when we ate pancakes and stuff. Well, they call it flapjacks or something like that, and then pancakes are like how we call it pannenkoek. Anyhow, and I always loved rain. Rain was for me the most beautiful thing, because everything is green after that, life comes. I remember a friend of mine that he joined our school in grade 7, which nowadays standard 5, and he was from a very dry area where it very seldom rained. And I remember the first day in the winter when it started raining, he was standing in front of the window, like just staring at the rain, like, what is this kind of idea? It just kept on coming, kept on coming. So rain is very important, it's super important, and so enjoy the rain there in the back. Even in wetter areas, rain is very important, because if it doesn't rain a lot here, then things go bad very fast. Okay, so this is now the rainy season, by the way, here in Thailand. So there's not raining, there's drought, there's famine because of that. Okay, and so what? Jacob heard then, as we see in verse 1, that there's grain in Egypt. Why is there grain in Egypt? Because of Joseph, right? Why is Joseph? It started with a dream of Pharaoh. Joseph giving the explanation of the dream. Joseph being imprisoned. Joseph in Potiphar's house. Joseph back in at home, sold by his brothers into slavery. Joseph bringing stories about his brothers. Jacob loving Rachel more. Jacob cheating Esau. Right, so you can take the story all the way up back to Adam ultimately sinning. Right, sin led to all of this. No sin, no drought. No sickness, no death. And so Joseph is then ultimately there because God put him there. For the sake of his family, which will be fed now, thanks to Joseph, but as well for the sake of so many other nations around. The blessing, as God said, that they will be a blessing to others. So he's like, why you look at one another? Why are you not going there? Why are you sitting here, sitting and playing on your cell phones games, right? You can't plant because there's no rain, right? There's no work outside for you, so get off the TVs and go down to Egypt, right? Take the train, go down to Egypt. Well, if it was that easy, understandably. Okay, get a truck. Well, these days, yeah, it's easy, but if people stop you from bringing in food, then, well, you know, then it becomes impossible as well, as is happening at the moment there, in that same part of the world. And, yeah, so, then in verse 2, it says, I've heard that there's grain there, so go down to Egypt. Okay, so Jacob is the one here pushing them to go. Maybe they didn't want to. I mean, I guess they ought to have thought of it. Maybe they were looking at each other, who's going to first, who's going to blink first and go there, who's going to mention it, whatever. But it's Joseph, the head of the family. And remember, by now, they're all in their 40s at least, maybe 50s already. So these guys are kind of old by now. They're not young guys, and Jacob would have been in like maybe around his 80s already. So they're not young guys. And so telling them, right, as the head of the house, which is, you need to stop wasting time and get down to Egypt. Right? Abram went down to Egypt when there was a famine. Isaac as well, kind of in that direction. He didn't go all the way to Egypt, to Abimelech, right? But, yeah, because his father was kicked out of Egypt, that is Abram. So now Jacob, go down to Egypt. So we're going to see, as I mentioned in the introduction as well, that here Jacob is the one pushing, and then ultimately back there, at the end of this chapter, Jacob is going to say, no, don't go to Egypt, because that will be the end of me. Okay, here he's forcing them to go to Egypt, because if they don't go, they don't have food, and that is the end of them all. Which ultimately in the next chapters we're going to see is the reason why they go back. Not because Jacob wanted. So this is what he says, go there, buy grain, so that we may live and not die. Verse 3. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. 10. Not, remember there were 12. Okay, so we know already one is out of the picture because one is in Egypt running the show. But there's an 11th one. Benjamin, the youngest. And clearly, immediately, for the sake of the story here stated, he did not go with. Only the 10. Okay, Jacob wanted them to go down to Egypt to go and buy food so they will all live. But he was not sending Benjamin with. Okay, we find that clearly stated in the end of the chapter. But here, without it being stated, maybe they didn't even ask, he is not sending him. Okay, and Benjamin wasn't a baby anymore. He wasn't even a teenager anymore. Okay, right? He was already born by the time Joseph went there. And we know Joseph by now, this is at least 20 years later, because he was 13 years slave in prison, 7 years of good years that they were collecting. And we don't know if this is most likely not the first year, right? Maybe the second year. So it could have been like 22 years later, 23 years later. We don't exactly know. And Benjamin's born, so he's at least, well, very close, I would say, rather closer to 30 than in his mid-20s. So yes, it's not as if, but it's not the age that's the problem, as we're going to see at the end of the chapter, but the fact that he is kind of, as according to Jacob, his only son. Okay. So yeah, they went then back down to Egypt to buy the grain. Verse 4. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Verse 5. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So as we've seen now, I already explained in the previous verse, that here we get this explanation why. Because Jacob, he wanted them to go down. He was angry at them not going down. Maybe that's the reason why they were dawdling. They kind of all wanted to go, and they kind of expected that they need to take Benjamin with because he's one of them. But at the same time, they knew that if Benjamin goes, their father's not going to like it. So they kind of maybe wanted to go, but they wanted to take Benjamin, but they were afraid to ask their father. And it's only now that the father pushes them to go that, and then clearly the father says, no, answer their question. No, Benjamin's not going with. You 10 guys go. That's that. Right? And so there can be explanations for, and maybe they were just waiting for this clarity concerning Benjamin before they did anything. They didn't want to, out of their own, just assume things. Okay, now I think they ought to have assumed, and most likely they knew that Benjamin won't go with, right? But yeah, they were waiting for their father, and now he did. So they went. Benjamin didn't go with, and they were just a few of lots and lots of thousands, of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands maybe, we don't know, people coming down to Egypt to look for food. Of course, there was a famine in their land as well. Okay, so just a reiteration again. Like before, Abram went, famine in land of Canaan, famine in land of Canaan, right? Didn't rain, famine. Okay, unlike here.